Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for the Basic Steps to Starting a Business webinar. My name is Christopher Garcia and I'm the Business Development Specialist at the SBDC at UNM Valencia campus. We created this webinar off of a great document on our website called The Basic Steps to Starting a Business. And my contact information is on the slide, and a PDF of these slides will be emailed to you. So don't worry. Let's move on. This is actually my favorite webinar you guys saw. I'm excited. Before we begin, let's go over some webinar ground rules. Everyone on the call right now is muted, so don't worry about background noise. There's a feature to raise your hand, and I'll use it to make sure the webinar is flowing. In fact, everyone who could see my slides and hear me, can you raise your hand for me, please? Very good. Gosh, this is a good group. I don't have to worry about you one bit. Thank you. I'm going to lower hands. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A, and I saw hi in the Q&A so far, so hi. It's a feature at the bottom of your screen, and I'll answer the questions at the end of the presentation or as I have time between slides. And each slide is numbered, so include your slide numbers with your questions. And before we get too far into this, I want you to put in the Q&A a hi or a hello, just so I know you could use it. And hi, Rachel. I'll use your question as your hello. Just to make sure everybody could use that Q&A. Hi, Jordan. Hello, Kathy. Hi, Miguel. Hi, hello, Paul. Hello, Dylan. Hello, Michelle. Hello, Monty. Perfect. Let me close out some of these questions. These hellos. And then I see a hello in the chat. You're welcome to use it since I don't have anybody coordinating with me today. You're welcome to use the chat, but I prefer all questions get in the Q&A because there's a report I could pull of all questions after this broadcast. So here's a graphic of our center locations throughout New Mexico, and the mission of the SBDC is to build skilled entrepreneurs and strong businesses by offering no-cost confidential business consulting and lower no-cost training events like this one. And I'm going to tell you more about the SBDC in the next few slides. This slide includes 3 topics for upcoming trainings: basic steps to starting a business, this one, QuickBooks Online, which we offer periodically throughout the year, and cybersecurity for small business 6-part series. We recently finished those. I want to invite you to our NMSBDC website to view our most up-to-date trainings. In fact, let's see what's going on in the next week's. The lovely Leslie Everson isn't with me, and she does a great job introducing the trainings. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll point out the trainings that I'm coordinating. So on August 23rd, it's a 2-part series. It's listening to your business. And then the Intentional Entrepreneur 2-part series will begin on August 24th. And that Intentional Entrepreneur, it's probably one of my favorite new webinars so far. And we are planning to offer the Listening to Your Business and the Intentional Entrepreneur every month. And the curriculum was created by a great person we have working for us, Guillermo Tilly. And I really think you'll get a lot out of both of those workshops, or webinars rather. If you've gotten a PPP loan or an EIDL loan and you want to learn about the tax implications, tune in with Peggy McDonough. August 21st, she's a wealth of information. And we just recently started offering a bilingual session for accessing financial resources for small businesses. And that's with one of our favorite people, Marvin Lozano. He worked for us, and he currently is a loan officer at the Loan Fund. Let's go back to our slideshow. Here's the agenda for today's training, and I'm going to tell you more about the SBDC, talk to you about our pre and post surveys for this training, get into the basic steps, and then review and demonstrate our excellent research tools. Then take questions. I'll also have you raise your hands throughout the presentation just to make sure everything is going okay. And in fact, I like to see who's here from where. So I'm going to open up my participants, and will you raise your hand for me if you are from the central New Mexico area, so Albuquerque metro area. Okay, a few of you today. That's where I'm at. I'm in Los Lunas. I'm located at the SBDC at UNM Valencia campus. How about if the northwest, so Farmington area? Do I have any but Northwesterners here today? I don't see any Northwesterners. How about Southwesterners, so Tucumcari area, Clayton? No, I don't see any Norteños with us today. Let's go to the south. How about Southwest area? So we're thinking Silver City. Well, welcome. Thank you guys for attending all the way from southwestern New Mexico. And how about Southeast? So we're thinking Hobbs, Lovington area. Okay, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It looks like we are South Central today. Oh, somebody from Mimbres. Very good. Okay. Now let's talk about the services of the SBDC. We offer two major services: confidential business counseling and no-cost business trainings like this one. There are no limits to how much no-cost counseling you can receive, and we have centers throughout New Mexico, so there'll be one close to you. If you look at the graphic in the upper right-hand corner, it shows what we do: renew, grow, launch, and start up small businesses. This slide shows what we expect from our clients. My fellow business advisors want you to succeed, so you'll be assigned homework or further research, so please do the work necessary to succeed. We can't make decisions for you or offer tax or legal advice. We can only connect you to the information you need to make educated decisions. And it's always great to work with attorneys and accountants because they have the certifications that you need to get those answers. Next, I want to remind you about important surveys we send out as part of attending these trainings. Everyone who registered for this webinar received an email from Leslie Everson saying, in anticipation of the upcoming Basic Steps to Starting a Business in New Mexico event that you have registered for, we would like to collect some preliminary information from you. With this information in hand, we can tailor the course material to better fit your needs. So I just want to see by a show of hands, how many of you received the pre-webinar evaluation? Oh, good. Almost everybody. You guys are doing good. If you haven't, please check your spam or your junk box. Very good. And if you have any trouble accessing that, you could email Leslie Everson or me. You'll also receive a post webinar evaluation. Please take the time to do that, and we'd really appreciate it. Perfect. Very good. Now let's talk about starting a business in New Mexico. Before going into business, there are some important considerations you have to think about. Will I make enough money to live? Will this replace my current income? Do I need the benefits offered by my current employer? And these include things such as retirement plans, medical insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, or other important benefits. Can you replace those benefits by starting your business? You must also think about your educational background and skills. Do you have the correct educational background and skills to understand and operate the many facets of a business? This includes bookkeeping, accounting, human resources, supply chain management, sales, and that's just to name a few. If not, you may need to hire somebody to perform these tasks or attend more training. And now I want to show you a great handout we have on our website called Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur. And because I have this opportunity, I want to show you the follow-up email you're going to receive. Since my links don't work very well on the slideshow, I'll show you on our follow-up email. So here's what our follow-up email looks like. Has my mug on it, and then a little thank you for attending. And then all the links, I went through the slideshow and I made sure all the links were included in this follow-up email, and I put some extra links too that are very good. So let's go to Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur. And it's a rate my skills sort of worksheet here, and this could help you and your advisor to see where you might need some extra help and where you're doing very well already. Some myths and misconceptions about entrepreneurship. Identifying startup ideas. Feasibility analysis, which I really like to do. I like to do the research. Estimating the cost of a startup. And we have special financial projection software. We call it the South Dakota spreadsheet. And we pay a yearly fee, and it's a really great spreadsheet for predicting startup cost or putting your cost of your current business into perspective. You could do something like this, but this is just one step in the whole financial projection process. Your personal living expenses, it's great to know your budget before you jump into any new business, just to make sure you're able to keep your current lifestyle, or maybe adjust your current lifestyle. You could estimate your business operating costs. That financial projection spreadsheet I mentioned is very good for this. You could recap your costs. And then here's that worksheet on which this webinar is based, the basic steps to starting a business. And then on the back are some contact information for some of the agencies you may need to contact. And then there's a small business plan outline. I like to use the business plan that I got from our Alamogordo office, and that is included in the follow-up email. That is the SBDC at UNM Valencia business plan template, how fast I took credit for that business plan template. And then there's some questions in this document and a little bit of marketing insights. So that's a great document before you even begin thinking about opening a business, just to review. Let's go back to our slideshow. And if at any time you're not seeing the slides that I'm talking about, that happens periodically. Raise your hand or send me a chat, and when I see 10 chats in a row, I'll realize something's going on. So now let's get into our steps. Step one is defining the business. This is the who, what, when, where, and why, and how. And these questions are answered in a business plan. And if you need a business loan, you must provide a business plan to the lender. Many centers use a fill-in-the-blank business plan template, and I'll email that to you. You saw that. But there are many options for creating a business plan, like online software such as LivePlan. SBA.gov has a great training with worksheets, and we have more tools available at nmsbdc.org. I also want to point you toward the New Mexico Economic Development Department one-stop website for starting a business, gonm.biz. And this website is a partnership between some local legislators and New Mexico agencies you may need to contact when starting a business. So I showed you the basic steps handout already. Let's go to gonm.biz. And if you have questions about LivePlan, SBA's training, I'll talk more about that as we get to the end of the webinar, or you could put a question in the Q&A. So this is what it looks like at the NM Economic Development Department website. And what I want to cover with you today are the business development, the funding programs available to new businesses. So you navigate to the business development tab, And then you could go through this. It's all great information, and then there's the COVID-19 resources right down here. I want to talk about NMEDD programs for small business. And I want to go over, I'll talk to you about the job training incentive program if you want me to. So put that in the Q&A if you want more about that. But I want to go over the finance development portion of the website. So the first program I want to talk to you about is LEDA, or the Local Economic Development Act. Look, I knew it even before it showed up on the screen. And what LEDA does is it allows the state to put aside a pot of money to spur economic development by awarding a municipality money to reimburse a business for entering that municipality. And what they're looking for when you're applying for money in this program are businesses with a significant community impact and support, locating in rural and underserved areas of New Mexico, increased wages and job creation, significant new capital investment, and environmentally sustainable outcomes. And some of the qualified entities are those in the manufacturing, processing, or assembling of agriculture manufactured products, manufacturers, a commercial enterprise for storing, warehousing, distributing, or selling products of agriculture, mining, or having been manufactured. Again, New Mexico has one of the, New Mexico has one of the biggest mining industries in the nation. So anything that supports this industry. And economic-based employers, which is defined as an employer who is deemed eligible for in-plant training assistance by the Economic Development Department's Job Training Incentive Program. That doesn't give you too much insight, but what an economic-based employer is it's an employer or a business that brings in most of its revenue from out of state. So this could be something like somebody who sells online, maybe a trucking company, something like that. Non-qualifying entities enterprise for the sale of goods and commodities at retail or for distribution to the public. More and more, since things have become tight because of COVID-19, they may go for a retail entity in a rural and underserved area. You would have to check with them. And then somebody supplying the services to the general public or governmental agencies. So if this is something you want to do, if you want to start something maybe a little bit bigger than a small business, you may be able to get some money there. Let's go to the Collateral Assistance Program, or CAP. So if you want to start a business, there are less requirements for this this assistance than with the LEDA money. But if you want to start a business and say you want to build a metal building, say you're a salon, you want to start your salon, you're in a rural and underserved area in New Mexico, you have, the building's going to cost you $300,000 to put up. You have $200,000. You need to take out a loan for that $100,000, but you don't have collateral to back up that loan. The bank wants you to put dollar for dollar collateral. You've already put your house up on the as collateral. You can't use that. So you need collateral for that $100,000 loan. You could apply for that assistance to the New Mexico Economic Development Department. And, you know, the qualifications are pretty lax for this, and they really want people to start up new businesses. And the last program I want to talk about is opportunity zones. So what opportunity zones are, and it's best explained when I take you to the map. And of course, since I'm located in Valencia County, we'll take you to Valencia. They're zones designated as low economic outcomes, but high potential for investment. So this is the whole west side of Valencia County, the west side of Los Lunas, the west side of Belen. And what these zones allow you to do is apply for funding through an opportunity fund. And people who invest in opportunity funds are investing to defer the payment of capital gains taxes. So if I had sold my house, maybe I had $1 million home, I'd have to pay 20–30% on the profit made on the sale of that home. It could be a large amount of money. And instead of me paying the IRS my capital gains taxes, I could invest it in an opportunity fund. In turn, that opportunity fund invests in businesses that locate in these opportunity zones. And if you look at Valencia County, if we zoom in a little bit more, let's see, Main Street's about right here. No, let's see here. Yeah, Main Street would have to be about right here. So Facebook is located here. You might have heard about that in the news, the data center. If you look at Rio Communities, this is where the Keter injection plastic company was. So it's just a way for people to get investment into these low income, low socioeconomic outcome areas. And there's a lot in if you look in Albuquerque, a lot of us are here from the Albuquerque area. Look, most of the west side of New Mexico, of Albuquerque, the southeast side of Albuquerque, Martinez Town, where I grew up. Yep, right. I grew up right in here. And this is all a great manufacturing sector. So you could tell they're really looking for manufacturing type jobs. And let's see, we have some people from the southeast. Oh yeah, right here. This is the, I believe it's Sunland Park. This is that whole at Sunland Park industrial area. And then we had somebody from Mimbres, which is just north of Albuquerque. Doesn't look like there are a lot of opportunity zones in the north, but there are some in Santa Fe. Pretty spread out throughout Santa Fe. Well, that's enough on opportunity zones. If you want more information about that, put that in the Q&A. Let's go back to our slides. Step 2 is choose a business name. There are legal considerations when choosing a business name, and it's very important to find a name that resonates with your target market, looks good on a website, social media, business cards, and other marketing material, is easy to spell and pronounce, and isn't trademarked or copywritten by another business. And let me give you a good example. There was a restaurant in Albuquerque called Dee's Cheesecake Factory, and if you grew up in Albuquerque, this is probably one of your favorite places for lunch or a sweet treat. The owners of Dee's Cheesecake Factory started this business after World War II and trademarked the name in the state of New Mexico. Fast forward to about 2011, 2010, there's a national chain called The Cheesecake Factory that wants to do business in New Mexico, but could not operate a restaurant with Cheesecake Factory in the name because the savvy business owners at Dee's reserved that business name many years before. In this example, the small business had the upper hand, but you could imagine how a small business operating under a trademark business name could end up being sued, have to change their business name and all that expensive marketing material, or might actually have to close because they're being sued. So there are two types of trademarks. There are state and federal. The first website on the screen is for the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and the second is for the New Mexico Secretary of State's office. These are the two agencies responsible for registering trademarks. And since we can't provide legal advice, it's important for you to consult with an attorney before making a decision on a business name. I'll show you some great resources later in the presentation, including the newest member of our SBDC team, the Technology Commercialization Accelerator at New Mexico Tech, staffed by Estefanita Rawlings. So United States Patent and Trademark Office, that's national trademark. If you're going to do business across state lines, if you're going to do business online, it would be good to investigate a federal trademark. If you're going to do business just in the state of New Mexico, maybe you're a full service restaurant, a laundromat, somebody in the older industries, a state trademark would be fine. And the first step in getting one of these trademarks is to register your business. If you are a sole proprietor, it's going to be a little more difficult to get a trademark than if you were a corporation, because you register the name when you become a corporation. Step 3 is choosing and registering your legal structure. The legal structure of your business is its foundation. You must carefully consider how you wish to legally operate your business. The common business structures are on the slide. Everything but sole proprietorships must be registered with the New Mexico Secretary of State's office, and the paperwork is available solely online. More information about legal structures can be found in the document called Basics of Choosing a Business Entity. And let's take a look at that follow-up email. Basics of Choosing a Business Entity. Here it is. It's put together by an attorney. Goes over the laws under which you're governed as a small business owner. Then it goes into the pros and cons, or the basic information about each type of business entity. A lot of people ask me, don't I register the name of my business as a sole proprietor if I'm doing business as? No, we don't have a formal doing business as registration in New Mexico. They might have one in Texas, but you could reserve your business name for 120 days at a time with the Secretary of State's office. I think it costs you $25 a pop. Or you could just incorporate for $50, a limited liability company. It would be, and choosing a legal structure is very, it depends a lot on your personal economic situation. It depends on your marital situation. There's a lot of considerations, legal and accounting, to think about. So there's no one size fits all what's best for everybody. Go back to our slides. Oh, let me go back one. I'm not doing a good job of going backwards here. And then the different types of corporations here, there's B, C, and S. B corporations, that it stands for benefits corporations. This is a rather new type of corporate structure. We're lucky in New Mexico to have one of the first in the nation, Taos-Ski Valley. But it's a business that benefits a cause. So Tom's Shoes is a good example. When you buy a pair of shoes, they give a pair of shoes to somebody in Africa. And there's just some regulations for what cause you're taking care of and how much you donate, if you're environmentally sustainable, and some other factors. And this is with my younger entrepreneurs, this is a great, trendy thing to think about. Step 4. And now that we're having fun with paperwork, let's talk about step 4. Obtain your federal employer identification number. This is the unique identification number issued to your business by the IRS. And I see somebody raising their hand. If you could see my slides and hear me, can you raise your hand for me? Just to make sure that we're on the same page. We should be on step 4. Okay, very good. Thank you guys for that. So this is the unique identification number issued to your business by the IRS and is used on all federal filings. If you're a sole proprietor, your social security number is commonly used instead of an EIN, but you could still apply for an EIN as a sole proprietor. This number is just as important as a social security number, and it should be protected as such. There's actually more fraud that happens with EIN numbers than with social security numbers. And no matter what business entity you choose, it's a good idea to obtain this number, and it's required to open a business bank account at most banks and credit unions in the state. Perfect. Continuing with our paperwork requirements, step 5 is to register with the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to obtain a CRS ID. You might be wondering what a CRS ID is used for and why you need it. Well, it's a unique identifying number used by the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to record and track your business's collection and payment of gross receipts tax. If gross receipts tax is a new term for you, you might recognize it as the tax you pay whenever you buy goods or services in New Mexico. It's usually around 8% and shows up on the bottom of a receipt. The online registration form is free to complete, but you may want to seek the advice of a CPA when completing the application because you might not want to track and report yourself. The online registration form is free to complete again. You must also file your gross receipts tax reports on a monthly, quarterly, or bi-yearly schedule. Therefore, the department offers great online training, and I have the link on the slide, but let's see if it wants to work with me. If not, it'll be in that follow-up email. We're just going to test it. Yep, it's working. So here's the workshops offered by the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department. The next one will be on August 24th. And if you are not going to have any employees, you could probably get away with the 9:45 to 11. If you are going to have employees, or you're going to be an employer, stay for the whole webinar. If you have any questions about gross receipts tax, bring them to this webinar. The young woman who puts it on knows more about gross receipts tax than anybody would ever want to know. Perfect. Let's go back here. Step 6 is to obtain your local business license and other applicable licenses. When doing business in New Mexico, you need a business license in the municipality or county where you have a physical presence. For instance, Teofilo's restaurant has a physical presence in Los Lunas, so they get a Village of Los Lunas business license. And that's my alarm clock. Hold on 1 second, guys. I'm going to mute you. Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. I didn't want you to hear that alarm go off for a minute straight. So that was a nice minute break for my voice. Okay, so you have to get a business license where you have a physical presence. If the business in Los Lunas had a food truck and they did business in Los Lunas and Belen, they would have to obtain a temporary or full license in the city of Belen. Some of you might be thinking that you'll do business online or in another state. And this means getting a business license in any place where you'll physically conduct commerce. Each municipality or county has different requirements for obtaining a business license, so check with the municipal or county office or consult an attorney for further advice. Let me give you some examples. The City of Rio Communities asks you to sketch a floor plan of your business, and that's even if you're working from home. They want a floor plan of your business. Socorro County doesn't have a formal business licensing requirement. They just have a letter on their website that says, if you're doing business in Socorro County, you don't need a business license. Just get your gross receipts tax ID. An important item you must obtain before you could get a business license anywhere is your gross receipts tax ID number from New Mexico Taxation and Rev. And these business licensing laws in most municipalities, so the temporary permits, they govern things like revivals, traveling circuses, door-to-door salespeople. So that shows you how long it's been since anybody's even thought about these sort of laws in small towns. So make sure you really explore your options. Step 7 is to report new hires to the New Mexico directory. The link to the directory is on the slide, but this brings human resource considerations into light. Human resources is a very important part of any business and comes with many legal and accounting considerations. You can always contact an accountant or an attorney for specific information, but I included links to 2 good resources for learning more about employment procedures and laws. Our partners at Comply Right have a great blog with lots of resources for small business owners. And the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has a learning center website for small businesses. So let me show you those. Here's Comply Right. And Comply Right, in full disclosure, they sponsor the America Small Business Development Center conference. They are a paid, they're a service, a paid service, but they have a great blog with e-guides, research, and webinars. Take advantage of their free information. It's well worth your time. The next link is for the EEOC website, and they have a primer for small business. So if somebody feels that you've discriminated against them because they're in a protected class, race, creed, color, national origin, here in New Mexico, we have sexual orientation as a protected class. They are going to go to the EEOC and file a complaint, and then they will decide if that person has a right to sue for that discrimination. And if you don't want to get one of those right to sue letters, get the information before you open it, especially if you're going to open a storefront or have employees working for you. And there's the small business requirements right there. And there's the tips for small business. Read those, well worth your time. And here, of course, is the link to report new hires to the state of New Mexico. Keeping with the HR trend, step 8 is if you have employees, you may need to complete Form ES 802. This is a required form for the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions or Connections. And the Department of Workforce Solutions has many services, tax credits, and learning opportunities for small business owners. So I included their outreach website for small businesses. Some of the common services that the Department of Workforce Solutions offers are job postings, that's the big one, pre-employment screenings like typing tests, etc. And in some cases, they provide space to conduct interviews if, say, you're a virtual business based out of the home. If you're going to have employees at all, read this information. The more you know about this, the less you can be taken advantage of by unscrupulous bookkeepers, by business managers, and then you'll know exactly what you're paying, when it's due, and what it's for. And they have the employer handbook right here, an employment insurance handbook, information about starting and registering your new business, and then some hiring incentives. So the one they're talking about here is the Fidelity Bonds. So if you want to hire, a lot of people in my trades have this issue, but they want to hire somebody who, say, maybe has a felony. Say you're a accounting office and you want to hire a bookkeeper who might have an embezzlement charge, and they're way past, 15, 20 years ago, they're rehabilitated. You're going to take a chance on them. The Department of Workforce Solutions will give you a bond for like $50,000 if you want to hire this person, and they'll protect you against theft. If you hire people in disadvantaged classes, like those just exiting the foster care system, people with disabilities and whatnot, you could get a tax credit. You may not have to withhold or pay a lot of that state withholding. And then there's a great program. It's called the WIOA program, or the Workforce and Training Workforce Initiative, something. And if you're a person out of work, or you know a person out of work, say you own a trucking company, that person needs a CDL before they could work for you. They offer training to get people into these in-demand jobs. And then they have internship opportunities. So they pay 100% of the wages for interns that come from YDI. They have both adult and young people as interns. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. That the Department of Workforce Solutions has more services than you could imagine, and a lot of them are underutilized, so take advantage. Step 9 is if you have employees, seek the assistance of an accountant or a bookkeeper. You can see all the tax acronyms on the screen, like SUDA, FUDA, FIT, SIT, FICA. Oof. And if you're not willing or able to deal with them, please seek out a bookkeeper and accountant. And the IRS website also has a wealth of information about your federal tax obligations. So I put a link here for the IRS Small Business and Taxes webinar, Small Business Tax Workshop. And if you don't have any employees, you could probably get away with the first 4 lessons. If you're going to have employees, take the whole thing, just so you know. You get a great overview about your federal tax obligations. And they also have the IRS Small Business and Self-Employed Tax Center. This is included in your follow-up email. I visit it very often. So if there's anything you want to know about your federal tax obligation as a small business owner, visit this website. I would bookmark it if I were you. They have information about employer identification numbers, self-employment taxes, great links and information about how to e-file your employment taxes. If you're self-employed, there are special considerations for you, information about business structures, business tax credits, record-keeping requirements, information about starting a business, operating, closing. And then a lot of you on the line, I don't know, let me see by a show of hands. Let me lower all hands down. How many of you are in the gig economy? You do maybe ride sharing, grocery pickup, Airbnb, you rent out your home. How many of you on the line do that now? I don't see anybody who does that, but if you do, you're in the gig economy, and you might you might end up in a big tax hole if you don't know exactly how you're going to be taxed in that gig economy. So they have a special site just for that. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about on that one. Step 10 is to seek the assistance of an attorney. And we talked about the important legal landmines in starting a business, and attorneys are licensed to answer questions about those. And let me tell you about some of the links I have here. So the first link I have is for the New Mexico Bar Attorney Directory. They just rebranded. They used to be nmbar.org. Now they're State Bar of New Mexico. Let's see if this works. If not, I have the link on the follow-up email, and that's www.sbnm.org. They have two programs or two resources I want to highlight today. So if you go to For the Public, I Need a Lawyer, they have the online bar directory, and then they have the general referral program. The general referral program is if you pay $35 to the Bar Association, they will set you up with a 30-minute consultation with an attorney that meets your needs. And then they have the bar directory. So if you need an attorney, or you're just looking around, see who's out there. As a small business owner, let me tell you how I like to use this website. I like to go to practice areas and practice counties. Since I'm in Valencia County, I could go to Valencia County. I doubt we're going to have any attorneys who practice in tax or business law. And then I go usually to the next biggest county near me, which is Bernalillo. Practice areas, some of the practice areas you would be interested in as a small business owner would be business corporations. Intellectual property for those patents and trademarks. Labor and employment law if you have employees. And taxation. So then I do a search. I don't mess around with all the other fields. There's no need. And here's a list of attorneys who practice in those fields that we selected. I would just do one at a time. I was just giving you an example of the different fields you might need. But let's pick one at random, eeny, meeny, miny. Well, and this is the information they give you. They give you the name of the attorney, their address, their phone number, their email address, and their practice areas. And you know, if you have a complicated issue, I would suggest having a consultation with more than one. See who you work well with and who best fits your needs. And then we were talking about trademarks earlier. The Patent and Trademark Resource Center is located at the New Mexico State University Library. The librarian who takes care of that center is David Irvin. He has a wealth of information. So and they serve the whole state of New Mexico. So if you have any questions related to intellectual property, patents, trademarks, David Irvin could help you find the backup research or help you research whether a patent or trademark is taken, and could give you insights to the steps to get that done. So there's David Irvin. And then we have our newest member to the SBDC staff and the New Mexico Technology Commercialization Accelerator. Oh, I'm going to run out of breath saying that. And while we wait for that to load, let me close some of these other windows. That website doesn't want to load today. It's taking a long time to load. Take my word for it, the Technology Commercialization Accelerator offers no-cost confidential counseling on patent and trademarks, intellectual property in general. Let me copy this link and send it out to everybody in a chat. And as Stefanita Rawlings is a wealth of information. Let's go back to our slides. We're almost to the home stretch. There are 13 steps. So step 11 is to review the guidelines for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is another legal landmine for small businesses and should be carefully considered, especially if you're going to have employees or you have a storefront. And they have many resources on their website. They actually have a primer for small business. So let's go to that website. There's the FAQ, and then there's the primer for small businesses. So please read that primer. And again, especially stress if you have a storefront or have employees. Let's go back to our slideshow. Step 12 is to establish a business bank account, and it's best practice to keep your personal and business finances separate. And this makes your bookkeeping process easier and will help your business if your business ever experiences an audit. There are a few different kinds of audits. There's a federal tax audit, a state tax audit, a gross receipts tax audit. So make sure you're keeping in compliance with all your bookkeeping and federal state obligations. If you're new to, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't advance the slide. There, establish a business bank account. If you're new to business banking, it's different than personal banking. And the FDIC, or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, has a program called Money Smart for small business. My links are working again. Very good. So here's the Money Smart for small business website. And it's a whole curriculum on just being money smart in small business. It's a great deeper dive into everything we talked about today. And if you take any module out of all the modules they have, I believe there are 12 or 13 modules, take the banking services module and learn the different banking services available to you as a small business owner. Risk management is another great module. And cash flow management is great. We also have a great webinar in cash flow management by Tommy Thompson. Our final step, step 13, is have adequate business insurance coverage. And this slide shows the common types of insurance coverage. And I recommend you research your options with an independent insurance broker. Oftentimes, independent insurance brokers sell insurance from many different companies and tend to be less biased. And you could learn more about business insurance by visiting the link on the slide. It's for Hitchcock's, and if you're not aware of Hitchcock's, they're the largest small business insurer in the nation. Let's go back to our follow-up email. See, I jinxed the links working here. So Hitchcock's, again, it's the largest small business insurer in the nation. You don't have to buy anything from them. They are a sponsor of our America's Small Business Development Conference, and they have this website specifically for our clients. And they give you the top 5 reasons for business insurance. And then they have 3 great videos. If you have time, you need insurance, watch these videos. They're well worth your time. What is small business insurance? What is general liability insurance? And what is professional liability insurance? Oh, okay, I'm going to take just a little bit of time before I get into the research tools to look at the Q&A, see what questions might have come up. Okay, Rachel asks, when do you need to register a business? When you are going to conduct commerce physically in a location. So all the time, all the time. You need, if you're going to start a business at all, you need to register that business. We talked about the 4 different things you need to register a business. You need to identify your organizational structure, your legal structure. If you're a sole proprietor, you don't have to register with the Secretary of State's office. If you're going to incorporate, you do. You need an EIN number. You need a gross receipts tax ID number. And then you need a business license in the municipality or county where you'll have a physical presence. Let's see, Rachel asks, is a business license the same as registering a small business? Kind of. I guess registering, I would think of registering a business as registering with the Secretary of State's my business structure, and then getting a business license in the municipality would be your last step. If you want me to clarify that a little bit more, feel free to put another follow-up in there. If you sell or consign your goods to an established business who collects the taxes, are you required to file GRT? If you are a registered small business, you have to apply for that gross receipts tax ID number. You have to file your reports whether or not you pay gross receipts taxes. So keep that in mind. If they issue you a 1099 at the end of the year, like you're an independent contractor, you'll have to pay self-employment taxes on that income. Rachel asks, do you have to get a business license if your business is entirely online? Yes, you still need a business license wherever your business is physically located. Those were great questions. I got one in the chat. Kathleen asks, do you need a business license if you work from home only? It's a service-based business. Yes, you do need a business license if you work from home only. You don't necessarily have to become a LLC or anything like that. But many of the larger cities, Los Lunas has a home occupation business license. It's different than a regular business license. The city of Albuquerque has the same thing. But basically what it is it's a record for the municipality or county that you are doing business. So if anything goes wrong, they could send the lawsuit to your front door. Do you need a physical address if you're only an online business? That's a great question, Dylan, and yes, you do. So the Secretary of State's office and the most of the municipal or county offices will ask you for both a mailing address and a physical address, and that's how you decide where you need that business license. So if you're working out of the home, you live in Albuquerque, you would need a business license in Albuquerque. Rachel has follow-up. So GRT is separate from collecting and reporting sales tax. We don't actually have sales tax in the state of New Mexico. We have gross receipts tax. So sales tax for like our neighbors to the East Texas, they have sales tax and they only tax goods. We tax goods and services in the state of New Mexico. So it's the gross revenue that we're taxing. We're not taxing goods or just goods or just services. And yes, it's separate. Liz asks, do you have to log on and complete CRS tax filings if there is no revenue for that? You do, Liz. And most of the time, if you are making under a certain amount, they'll only have you file quarterly. But if you miss that reporting, you could get a gross receipts tax audit and you have to pay $5. So even if you have no gross receipts taxes to report, you still have to report that 0. Daniel asks, you're selling your own personal items inconsistently. What income level are you regulating that would warrant a business license? Really, I have to tell you, any legally any income level would. The IRS uses, let's see, let's get from the IRS's mouth. I believe it's $600. Okay, from sell $400 or more. So when I was selling online, I was in the same situation as you. Sometimes I would have some months where I wouldn't sell anything. Sometimes I'd sell a lot. And if you sell online, on one of the larger marketplaces, they will send you a 1099 at the end of the year, and you do have to claim that income. And it's usually $400 or more. And see, look where that information came from, the Self-Employed Individuals Tax Center. Perfect. That's a great question, Daniel. Rachel. If someone else is selling your goods in their licensed registered business by consignment, you have to have a business registration license in New Mexico. No, I don't think you would have to have a business license if you're consigning a product, because really you're paying that business to sell your product. You're giving them commission. But if you were in like a indoor flea market and you were renting a booth and selling products directly to customers, I would recommend getting a business license. But if you're consigning a product, you're paying that store to sell your product for you, you don't need a business license because they're taking care of the tax obligations. Let's see if I have anything in the chat, and then we'll go into research tools. And Kathleen asks, on a 1099, do you pay both New Mexico gross receipts and self-employment taxes? You do pay self-employment taxes, but the gross receipts would depend. So if I was, say, one of those industries where I didn't have to pay gross receipts tax, say I'm a counselor working for an agency as an independent contractor, they usually pay the gross receipts taxes when they sell the goods or services. And me as an independent contractor, I don't have to pay the gross receipts or collect it. So that would be it depends. It depends. Michael asks, if your business is an LLC, does your logo have to have LLC on it? It doesn't have to have LLC on it. I think having LLC next to your business name is gives you that, provides you with greater limited liability protection. But I can't answer legal questions. I've just heard that before in different lectures. Floyd asks, if I live in Roy, New Mexico, but want to do business in Santa Fe, I only need a license in Santa Fe, right? No, you need a license where you're going to physically have a presence. So if you're home-based and you live in Roy, you need a business license in Roy. And if you're going to do business in Santa Fe, maybe you work at some of the big events they have there, you would need either a temporary or a full business license. And typically it's less expensive to get a full year business license than a temporary vendor permit. Who would have thought, right? And then I gotta thank you. Okay, I think that does that with the questions. Now you're welcome to ask any more questions, but I'm going to show you some of the research tools because I think they're great for both operating a business and writing a business plan. Let's go to the library. Let's go to databases. And the first database I want to show you, oh, let me go back to the slideshow. So let me go over the first four, because the first four on the slide are free. The first link is a great 30-minute webinar from the SBA's website on how to write a business plan. And they also provide great worksheets and examples of financial projections. And I like to go into this link. And of course, the link doesn't want to work for me, so we'll go directly to it. So it's sba.gov, like small business administration.gov. And under learning platform, there's two new learning platforms. They just redid how the site, it used to be a lot of different things and not in no particular order. Now they put it in a great order. If you're a woman or a man, it doesn't matter. You could apply for Ascent, and Ascent is a guided practice specifically for women to start or grow a small business. Everybody could enter the regular learning center, and they have really well organized learning modules on planning, launching, managing small business. I took the planning one, how to write a business plan, as part of my professional development here at the SBDC. It was great. It says it's going to take you 41 minutes. It took me about an hour and a half, so be aware of that. And they have the great documents and worksheets, so examples of the incomes, the financial statements you need to apply for a business loan. Another great one is the legal requirements. I got through most of this module as well, and it's really, really good. And it could answer some of those questions. Do I need a business license if I'm only operating in Santa Fe? They don't get that into it. I have a little bit more knowledge about New Mexico than the SBA provides. But take the legal requirements option. It's well worth your time. Back here. The second link is for bplans.com by Palo Alto Software. And this website provides you with numerous business plan examples. They used to sell these business plan examples on a CD-ROM for like $300. Now they offer them all for free because they have that life plan software they want to sell you. But it's great. They have all the business plans examples. Don't reinvent the wheel, just look at those. The third link is for Census Business Builder, and this, for the life of me, I can't get to work for my past few webinars, but this is a no-cost database that allows you to find demographic information about your customers, census stats about businesses in your industry, and estimates of yearly household expenditures. And I'll pull up a report I've pulled previously and give you an example of that. And the last link is for the Middle Rio Grande Council of Governments Interactive Traffic Counts map. And this allows you to enter an address or click on a stretch of road and see what the average weekday and average weekly traffic counts are for that stretch. So let me pull up the Census Business. I love Census Business Builder. It's just has not been cooperating. I've been trying to pull this report since 8:15 this morning, and it's still going. So I don't know what's going on with you, Census Business Builder. Here's a report I pulled on. It looks like the zip code 87107 in Albuquerque. And here are the demographic, here's the demographic information this report provides. Here we see age, race, gives you socioeconomic characteristics about that zip code, that county, that city, that municipality, that census tract. And this gives you the average household income. Well, that's a good, that would be a great place to start a business, right? At least during that time. I don't know when I pulled this report. Let's see, percent of educational attainment, people with disabilities, percent of veterans, language spoken in the home. Housing characteristics for my tradespeople, my plumbers, my contractors, you would want to know what the average price of, or the average housing unit value in that zip code. Well, that's a pretty good price right there. And what it costs to, maybe if you want to start an apartment complex, like what it costs to rent versus own. It's much cheaper to rent in that area than to own a home. Key stats about businesses like yours. If you're looking at just this zip code, there may not be that much information. This zip code happens to have some good information about whatever sector I chose that day. And see not a lot of information in these smaller areas. If there are under 100 that come up, you won't get much information. If you're living in a place where there's more than 100 of that industry, it will give you information. And my favorite part of this whole report are the consumer expenditures. So this is per household per year. So this is what a household spends in a year on these different categories. And if I wanted to start a food truck that served lunch, in this zip code, the average household spends $838.40 on lunch away from the home yearly. Let's see, the one that makes me laugh is dating services. Oh, this one spends 70 cents, double Valencia County. And let's see, what's another one? Hair care products. I want to start a hair care store. That might not be the place to start a hair care store. So that's what I wanted. These reports are very valuable. I don't know what's going on with Census Business Builder lately. It hasn't worked for the past 3 webinars, but I'll try to use the regional analyst edition. So the regional analyst edition works. Let's see if I can create a regional report. So the region, it looks like the census, the business builder isn't working. It looks like the regional analyst edition is working. So let me give you an example here. So here's the business builder. Let me create a report. taking forever and a day. The regional analyst edition is working. The regional analyst edition won't give you those stats about businesses like yours, but they will give you the socioeconomic information, the demographic information, and let's see if it gives you the yearly household expenditures. Yes, it gives you the yearly household expenditures. So my advice to you right now, I really wish it was the small business edition was working, because the reports are much easier to understand for those wanting to start a small business, but the regional analyst edition is working. So take advantage of that. Traffic counts, and now I want to show you IBIS World, Reference USA, and Demographics. Now these are databases the SBDC spends a lot of money to use, and you need to contact an SBDC counselor to get one of these reports. Let me show you IBIS World. So what IBIS World reports are, their industry reports put together by economists that talk about the future of an industry. And I like to use fast food restaurants as an example. Because there's a lot of fast food restaurants and a lot of information is available for them. So let's see, the first part of this report I want to talk to you about are the key external drivers, or I like to call these the key economic drivers. These are things that happen in the economy that affect the industry. So for fast food restaurants, it's affected by consumer spending, consumer confidence index, how people feel about the future of the economy, domestic trips by US residents, healthy eating index, and urban population. You get your first and second tier suppliers and your first and second tier buyers. If you do have first and second tier, in fast food restaurants, you're catering directly to the consumer. Let's see what our drivers are doing. This is between 2016 and 2021. They didn't venture a guess over the next few years. They usually do. So it looks like consumer confidence is growing, consumer spending is growing, urban population slightly growing, healthy eating is staying the same, and domestic trips by US residents is down. Revenue in that industry between 2016 and 2026, I'd say a small decrease, but pretty much staying the same over those few years. And profit looks like it's going to rise a bit. Profit margin in this industry is 4.6, so that's about 4.6 cents out of every dollar goes into your business's profit. Looks like it's on the rise, or it was on the rise between 2016 and 2021. The number of businesses looks like it's going to slightly decrease, stay about the same. Same trend for employment and same trend for wages. Here are the major products and service segmentations in that industry. So let's see, what do Americans like to eat? They like their burgers, followed by other. Here's a SWOT analysis of the industry, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In the last webinar, we looked at the major markets, and I'll show you that in a second. This shows you where the industry is in the business life cycle. Fast food restaurants happens to be in quality growth, so I would tell you that this is probably a great time to enter that industry. Here's our markets, our major markets. So I would want to find, if I wanted to open a fast food restaurant, excuse me, I would want to look for a place with a lot of households earning between $50,000 and $99,999, followed by households earning less than $50,000. I'd want to find, this would be my target market right here, these two markets right here. And those are the high points of an IBIS World report. Reference USA, or Data Excel as it's called now, is like a phone book on steroids. So I could go in here and and everything is based on home income or value of the home. My tradespeople want to know value of the home. My retailers want to know home income. Most of my clientele, for if I wanted to do a retail business or if I wanted to do a full service restaurant, would probably be 100,000 plus income level we're looking for. And then say they have a lifestyle interest in gourmet food and wine. Maybe I wanted to start a fancy French restaurant. And then I have to put in a city, state. I could do a metro area. I could do zip code, county, radius from an address. Let's use zip code as in this example. We'll use Los Lunas. And I could actually find the names and addresses of people who meet that criteria. I could send them a postcard. I cannot call them or email them unless I purchase this list. And these lists run about $1,000 for 5,000 contacts. If you're doing this in New Mexico in a small area, no way you're going to get more than 3,000 results. So I don't even think it's worth buying unless you're going to maybe focus on the state of New Mexico. But if you're going in a small area, maybe a postcard mailing might work for you. I could do the same for businesses. So if your business caters to other businesses, you sell professional services. I could find businesses that you may want to market to, give you executive names, and so on and so forth. So that's an idea of Data Excel right there. My three favorites: IBIS World, Data Excel, or Reference USA, however you want to call it, and Census Business Builder. Those are my top three. Demographics now is very similar to Census Business Builder, and that's hard for me to use. So I prefer the Business Builder when it's working. Let's go back to our slides. Oh, and I forgot to mention, one of those reports is upwards of $1,200. So take advantage as client of the SBDC, you could have access to those by contacting your local center and setting up an appointment. So now that we talked about how we can help you, this is how you could help the SBDC. As part of offering our services, we need your help to ensure services are around for many more years. So we ask that you participate in our surveys, report economic impacts because of our assistance to your advisor or director, and write letters of support to your local legislators about your experience with the SBDC. All information is kept confidential and is only reported in aggregate to our funders, the state of New Mexico, and the SBA. Now, I think I went over the slide just after this, but let me go over this slide with you. Since this is a COVID-19 webinar, I put this slide together and it has the most up-to-date information about COVID-19, operating a business during COVID-19. So let me find my spiel. Bear with me 1 second. The first link is to the New Mexico Department of Health's guidance for employers. The second link is to the New Mexico Safe Certified program, and this is a free interactive learning module about how businesses should operate during COVID-19 restrictions. The third link is for OSHA's publication on employer COVID safe practices. The fourth link is for information about COVID-19 from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The fifth link, and most important in my view, is an article by the EEOC called What You Should Know About COVID-19 and the ADA, the Rehabilitation Act, and other EEO laws. We are in an ever more litigious society, so this is a must read for everybody on the call today. The sixth link is for newmexico.gov, where you could find the most up-to-date information related to COVID-19, as well as lending and grant opportunities. And don't forget about the no-cost webinars and counseling services offered by the SBDC, SCORE, the Small Business Administration, and the New Mexico Economic Development Department. I have told you how you could help us. And now let me go over our resource partners. And this is PTAC, IBA. Okay. This slide provides contact information for SBDC programs, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, the International Business Accelerator, and the New Mexico Technology Commercialization Accelerator. The Procurement Technical Assistance Center is a government-funded program providing assistance to small businesses who want to sell their goods or services to the government, educational institutions, or tribal entities. The International Business Accelerator is a one-stop shop of resources for New Mexican businesses and individuals wishing to introduce their product or service into the global market. And the New Mexico Tech TCA offers no-cost confidential counseling regarding intellectual property. This slide continues the list of Small Business Resource Partner SCORE, or the Service Corps of Retired Executives, WEST, or the Women's Business Center, and VBOC, or the Veterans Business Outreach Center. WEST is also one of our nonprofit lenders. Here is the contact information for your small business support team, the Small Business Development Center, the Small Business Administration, and the New Mexico Economic Development Department. And here's a link to the SBA Resource Guide. A lot of people wanting to start a small business come to my office and they talk about SBA loans. And the SBA Resource Guide gives you a great overview of the different type of loan guarantees they offer. That is page 33. And on page 27 are a listing of SBA participating lenders listed by area. For those of you on the line who want to start new businesses, established banks and credit unions might not consider new business starts. The places that do consider new business starts are the Community Advantage Lender DreamSpring, micro lenders like the Loan Fund, and West. So those are the three that you would probably consider if you're starting something new. And they really only focus on micro loans, so loans under $50,000. Let's go back to our slides. And this concludes our slideshow for today. I'm now going to take questions from the Q&A, and I just want to thank everybody on the line for spending time with me. I really enjoy this webinar, and I hope you do too. So let's see, Daniel says, what about business income from podcasts and YouTube channel advertisement income? Yeah, you probably, you have to claim that on your taxes if it's over $400, Daniel. If you wanted to deduct your business expenses, you probably have to buy software to edit your videos. You might have to buy software to edit your podcast. You might have to buy equipment to put those things together. You probably want to start a business structure and take your deductions on your tax return instead of just claiming the income as trade income. Probably save you some money. But consult with a tax professional about that, of course. Rachel S., will you drop the Census Business Builder URL in the chat? I sure will. I love the Census Business Builder. When it works. I believe I chatted that over to everybody. This asks, I have a business registered to the state as of July and was given a CRS number. However, when I go to Rio Rancho business registration, it states that it's July 1st, they will issue a New Mexico State Business Tax Identification Number instead of a CRS number. Will I need both? So on July 1st, they changed the way gross receipts tax was calculated and paid, but they haven't made big changes to it. And I don't know what a B10, I'm not familiar with a B10, but if you go to the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue, Let's see if they have anything on B10 because it's always been CRS ID. They may have changed it come July 1st. See, there's the combined reporting system. There's the CRS stuff. I don't see anything about a B10 on the taxation's website. I would consult with a tax professional about that. But as far as I know, you need a gross receipts tax ID number. A B10 might pertain just to local taxes in Rio Rancho. I'm not 100% sure on that one. Daniel asks, what about reporting or licenses for business income from podcasts and YouTube channel or social media site advertisement income dollars? Yeah, you'd have to claim that on your taxes if it was over $400. But if you don't have a business structure and you're not filing a Schedule C as a sole proprietor or a Schedule K as a partnership, you may not be able to deduct those expenses. So you might be paying more tax than what you need if it's a profitable business. How can I schedule an appointment with you? Well, thanks for asking. If you want to talk with me and you're not located in Valencia County, make an appointment with your local Small Business Development Center. Let me go to SBDC, nmsbdc.org. And since you registered for this workshop, you're in the queue to receive services, but go to counseling on our website right here. It's the last option on the top. Go to request for counseling, and you could fill this out. This is what you did when you registered for the webinar, and it's not particularly helpful in our case. See where it says have questions, please contact your local New Mexico SBDC center. Click that. And then there's a listing of our contact information right here. So go to your local center. If you're in Valencia County, Socorro County, or Torrance County, I'm happy to meet with you directly. Contact me directly. There I am right there. Our business phone is here and I'm back in the office. If you are not in one of those counties I mentioned, say you're in Española, make an appointment with your counselor, either Juliana or Rita, and they could bring me into a counseling session virtually, and I could talk to you more if I have expertise on a topic you want to talk about. Rachel asked, you mentioned that there are different business structures in New Mexico, B and C. What are the last two? So there's sole proprietorships, partnerships, limited liability partnerships, limited liability companies, corporations, S corporations, and B corporations. And that article that I mentioned in the follow-up email, that basics of choosing a business entity, that will go into depth in all the business structures right there. Aaron asks, so we will receive the slideshow or a link to it. You'll receive the PDF of the slideshow and all the links that I'm showing you on the screen right now. Michael asks, I'm in Bosque Farms, reach out to me directly. Let me type my email address. I sent that over. Send me an email and we could coordinate a time to meet. You could either meet with me at the center or through Zoom. Liz asks, it's showing up here, Rio Rancho, New Mexico.gov. Okay, this is a follow-up to your question earlier about the B10. And I bet you the business taxation identification number, the B10 they're referring to there, is your employer identification number, but let's double check. Okay, thank you, Liz, for sending this follow-up question, because they're calling it a B10 here, and then they're sending you to the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department. It's a CRS number. They're just calling it a B10 there. I don't, to confuse me and you, I guess. I'm not sure, or maybe they're just using it as a general term, but it is the gross receipts tax ID number or CRS number that you need. And it is the same that you get under the TAP website. Yep, you're totally correct. Let's see in the chat if I got anything in the chat. Okay. Yeah, Liz, I'm glad you brought that question to. That's a funny one. Like I mentioned earlier, remember each municipality and county has different requirements. There's not one unified requirement for business licenses. So if you do see something like Liz pointed out where there's referring to a CRS number as a BTIN, bring those questions to your local advisor and we could help you out with that, because you don't have to go about that alone or contact an attorney or an accountant to get expensive advice. You could contact an attorney or accountant for that, but that was a question that I was luckily able to answer. Okay, let's look at the Q&A. It's a bit confusing because it says as of July 1st, they will no longer issue CRS. I haven't heard, I knew they changed things that on July 1st, but I didn't see an update where they're calling a CRS number a BTIN. And for the most up-to-date information on anything related to state taxes, go to the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department and go to businesses. And the best advice I could give you, Liz, is to attend one of those workshops I was talking about, where they go over the new reporting processes for the CRS system. And they haven't changed it, it's still the CRS system, so I don't know why they would call it a BTIN now. And the next one, again, is August 24th. Perfect. I answered the questions in the chat and the Q&A. If you'd like to speak, you could raise your hand. And let me see if we have any phone callers on the line. No, we don't. Let's see what Q&A. Is there any additional requirements with the state to register as a woman-owned or veteran-owned business outside of getting the certificates? There are certifications for those when doing business with the state. So let's look at the New Mexico State Procurement Office. And this brings up another thing. We have that PTAC, which is NMPTAC, that's New Mexico Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And they are our program that's under the SBDC umbrella that helps people do contracting with state and federal entities. So if you want to go into that deeper with them, I just happen to know that the State Procurement Office does have special forms you should fill out to be a woman-owned, veteran disabled-owned, veteran-owned small business. State Purchasing Division, General Services. And I don't know too much about these forms. I just know people come to me as a notary when I was a notary to get these notarized, but actually a certified public accountant has to do it. I'm going to chat over the General Services Department website to everybody on the call right now. And you could find out more information on that site. So I couldn't be more help there. Rachel S., if you had a CRS number for a while, 2 years, but now filed gross receipts tax form, is there any way to file retroactively? Do you need to do this even if there was no income during that time? You do. And there is a way to file retroactively. You either go to the state taxation and revenue column or log on to the CRS, the combined reporting system, the TAP system, and that information is in that quick start sheet right here. Here's TAP. And you log on, or you could create a login using your CRS number. And if you haven't paid or haven't filed, you'll see a whole long list of things that you need to do, and they will have $5 fees next to them if you have no income. So yes, you would just contact New Mexico Taxation and Revenue, and they will definitely tell you what you need to file and collect any fees or penalties. Great question. And well, I'll be with you for another minute or so, guys. So if you have a question, put it in there. When I'm looking at this TAP website now, it's talking about the disclosure of information. A lot of people were using one login for everybody and their mother, their tax accountant, their bookkeeper, their employee. And there was a lot of fraud happening or reports not getting filed in the TAP system. So now if you want somebody other than you as the business owner to handle your gross receipts tax, you have to file that ACD 31102 tax information authorization tax disclosure form, which apparently can be found here. And this just gives a third party access to your tax system, your gross receipts tax filings. And the combined reporting system, it also includes, this is also the place where you'll pay your state withholdings for your employees. And this is where you'll pay excise taxes, say you sold cigarettes or gasoline. Okay, that beep tells me it's 1 o'clock. It was a pleasure spending time with you all today. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to end the webinar for all. Thank you guys. Have a good day.